Long before the Dutch arrived to establish New Amsterdam, the region now known as New York was home to the Lenape people, who held rich oral traditions about the land, sky, and unseen spirits. Among their most haunting legends were the shadow giants, towering silent beings said to drift between trees in the dense forests of present-day Manhattan and the Catskills. These entities were believed to guard spiritual portals and punish those who disrespected the earth. Stories also spoke of sky fires, mysterious glowing orbs seen floating above rivers or shooting across the night sky, interpreted by the Lenape as spiritual messengers or warnings from ancestors. In the upper Hudson Valley, tribes told tales of thunderbirds, colossal winged beasts that caused storms and whose eyes were said to flash like lightning. These creatures, half bird and half spirit, were feared and worshipped, especially after lightning strikes or unseasonal weather patterns. In Lake Champlain and the Hudson River, there were whispered accounts of serpent-like monsters, massive, glistening creatures that surfaced during full moons. While modern scholars chalk these up to sturgeon or log sightings, to the early tribes, these monsters were real and sacred, and their presence a sign of cosmic imbalance. When Dutch colonists settled the area in the early 17th century, they brought their own superstitions, yet even they were shocked by what they encountered. Sailors and settlers recorded eerie accounts of sea serpents off the coast of New Amsterdam, said to coil around small boats and vanish beneath the surf. Some believed these were demons guarding the New World's riches. Inland, British settlers soon began reporting encounters with strange demonic birds with 6 wings and glowing eyes, especially in the remote, mist-shrouded woodlands near Haarlem and Yonkers. By the early 1700s, rumors of whistling shadows became common, figures that watched from the tree lines but vanished when approached. Local newspapers and pamphlets, often a mix of news and sensationalism, reported floating orbs of light, seen during thunderstorms, which some claimed were witch lanterns or phantasms haunting the colony. One famous 1753 account described a shimmering humanoid with no face appearing in a tavern window during a lightning strike in Brooklyn, terrifying guests. Colonial-era ministers debated whether these manifestations were the work of the devil, hallucinations, or divine omens. But among the superstitious settlers and fearful indigenous converts, these early accounts planted the seeds of what would become centuries of fascination with the unexplainable lurking in New York's shadows. As New York City rapidly expanded, during the 19th century, the construction of its first underground sewage systems gave birth to one of its most infamous legends, the sewer alligator. Though initially dismissed as tabloid fiction, multiple sightings of large reptilian creatures in the sewers circulated in local newspapers by the 1830s. Some claimed these beasts were discarded pets that mutated in the dark, dank tunnels. Others whispered of an entire colony beneath the streets, feeding on rats, and worse. Meanwhile, as poverty and crime surged in the growing city, people reported glowing-eyed beast-men stalking alleys near the Bowery and Five Points slums. These reports described tall humanoid figures with leathery skin and elongated limbs that disappeared into the shadows when chased. Though many chalked them up to alcohol-induced hallucinations or exaggerations, the stories persisted, especially among immigrants and factory workers. With the expansion of the subway system later in the century, workers digging deep beneath Manhattan told tales of unmarked side tunnels that led to rooms full of bones or walls covered in claw marks. Some laborers even refused to return to specific sites, claiming they heard whispers in unknown languages echoing through the underground. Public fascination with the paranormal was stoked by the popular press, which printed ghost stories, monster sightings, and unexplained vanishings with lurid headlines. These weren't just urban legends. They became part of the psychological fabric of a city where every alley and tunnel seemed to hold a dark secret. As wealth and opulence defined the Gilded Age, so too did a parallel rise in spiritualism and occult practices, particularly in the upper classes. Seance parlors flourished across New York, especially in Brooklyn Heights and the East Village. Elite families and curious intellectuals gathered around candlelit tables to communicate with otherworldly beings, and many believed these beings weren't the spirits of the dead, but extraterrestrial intelligences. Societies like the Theosophical Society and offshoot occult groups spoke openly about star spirits and luminous visitors who had arrived to guide humanity. Mediums began describing their contact with elongated beings and light forms that didn't match human ghosts. A few claimed that Central Park itself was built on ley lines, mystical energy paths that attracted these beings. One of the most sensational events occurred in 1896-1897, when a wave of mystery airship sightings swept across the U.S. New York was not spared. Witnesses in Harlem and Hoboken described cigar-shaped crafts flying silently over the city. Though these were dismissed by scientists and police as hoaxes or misidentified balloons, no evidence ever surfaced to explain them. At the same time, underground cults began forming in secret, worshipping what they called the Watchers, non-human entities said to dwell beneath the city and manipulate events from the shadows. A small religious community in Brooklyn was raided in 1908 after neighbors reported disturbing chants and disappearances linked to alien rituals. In the gilded parlors and decaying basements of New York, a dual belief grew that monsters and UFOs were not just science fiction, they were deeply woven into the city's past, hidden in plain sight. In the aftermath of the 1947 Roswell incident, American paranoia surrounding extraterrestrial life reached new heights, and New York quickly became a major hub of sightings, hysteria, and government denial. Newspapers like the New York Post and Daily News ran sensational stories of silver discs over Staten Island and flashing lights above the Empire State Building. Suddenly, the sky over the city felt alive with watchers. One of the earliest and most controversial sightings came in 1950, when hundreds of residents in Brooklyn Heights reported seeing a glowing, silent craft hover for nearly 5 minutes over the East River before shooting into the clouds. No aircraft were registered in the area, and the military issued a flat denial, only fueling public suspicion of a cover-up. Later that decade, the Staten Island incident stunned local authorities. In 1956, multiple reports described a saucer-shaped object diving into the water near the shore. When Navy divers investigated, they found strange metallic fragments and scorched sand, yet the area was quickly closed off and declared a restricted military zone. Eyewitnesses were told to forget what they saw. Perhaps most chilling were the early abduction claims. In 1961, a young couple from Yonkers claimed to have lost 3 hours of memory while driving home late at night after seeing 2 figures in the sky. Though doctors dismissed it as sleep deprivation, the couple exhibited burn marks and radiation-like symptoms. Similar stories began trickling in from rural areas surrounding the city, particularly around Hudson Valley, long considered a UFO hotspot. Amid Cold War fear and the space race, these reports were often discredited. But to many New Yorkers, it felt like something had shifted in the skies, and that we were no longer alone. By the 1970s, with New York City reeling from crime, economic collapse, and a crumbling infrastructure, the underground world took on new, terrifying dimensions. Urban explorers, homeless populations, and city workers began reporting sightings of what they described as lizard men and rat men, humanoid creatures lurking in abandoned subway tunnels and forgotten service corridors. The myth of the sewer mutants, once tabloid fodder, was now whispered among NYPD officers and sanitation workers. One of the most sensational cases occurred in 1977, when a Central Park jogger swore she saw a scaly humanoid with vertical eyes crawl out of the lake and retreat into the trees. Police found clawed footprints and broken branches at the scene, but no animal matched the description. This gave rise to the local legend of the Central Park Lizard Man, which gained traction on late-night radio shows and in local lore. Simultaneously, reports of black-eyed children began to surface in Queens and the Bronx. Witnesses claimed pale, silent children with pitch-black eyes appeared outside their homes or apartments asking for help, or to come inside. These beings were often accompanied by strange electrical disturbances, malfunctioning phones, and intense feelings of dread. Once considered fringe horror tales, these incidents were tracked by underground UFO networks and linked to interdimensional theories. The idea that the city's monsters and sightings were tied to secret government projects also grew during this era. Conspiracy theorists claimed that deep beneath the streets of Manhattan, government scientists and alien visitors worked side by side in hidden research facilities. They blamed this collaboration for strange disappearances, psychic experiments, and the alleged increase in non-human entities seen in corporate and government offices. Whether it was due to economic despair, Cold War anxiety, or real encounters, one thing was certain. By the 1980s, New Yorkers had stopped laughing at the idea of monsters and aliens. They started watching the skies and the subways closely. As New York entered the 1990s, the monster and UFO phenomenon evolved, less grounded in folklore and more entangled with technology, surveillance, and government secrecy. With the Cold War over and internet use exploding, urban legends entered. Cyberspace and eyewitnesses found platforms to share what mainstream media ignored. During multiple subway renovations in the early 90s, MTA workers reported unusual findings in sealed-off tunnels, rusted metal doors leading nowhere, walls etched with symbols not in any known language, and strange heat signatures on thermal sensors, despite no electrical wiring present. One whistleblower claimed to have seen a chamber with pods and blue light, which triggered a cover-up and his forced retirement. The MTA declined to comment. As security cameras became more common, grainy black and white footage began to leak on underground forums. One particularly chilling video from 1997 allegedly showed a tall, faceless figure riding the last car of an F train alone. It seemed to vanish before the train reached the next station. More alarming were incidents involving corporate buildings in Midtown. Security guards from at least 2 major financial towers anonymously claimed that alarms would trigger at specific hours, always around 3:03 a.m., with no one found on camera except for brief glitches, blurred silhouettes that didn't align with human motion. The footage would then mysteriously disappear. By the early 2000s, residents in Harlem and Long Island began reporting skyquakes, thunderous booms with no visible source, often followed by flashes of light. FEMA and NYPD denied seismic activity. A hacker group later released documents suggesting these booms corresponded to tests of interdimensional gateways by a government task force operating under the code name Project Obsidian. In this era of VHS leaks, late-night AM radio, and early internet forums, New Yorkers were no longer just afraid of what lived beneath the city, but of what might already be among them. In the age of smartphones and social media, the myths of monsters and UFOs in New York have transformed into viral phenomena, caught in pixels, dissected on TikTok, and debated on Reddit. But with better tech has come more confusion. Is what we're seeing real or a sophisticated hoax? A series of videos from 2016 to 2020 captured public attention, showing floating humanoids above the Brooklyn Bridge, hovering motionless before, shooting off at impossible speeds. One such clip had over 30 million views in a week before being flagged and removed for sensitive misinformation. No official explanation followed. In 2021, an Amazon delivery driver in Queens recorded what appeared to be a metallic disc hovering over an apartment complex during a power outage. Multiple neighbors reported hearing a high-pitched whine and seeing gray figures outside their windows. The footage was dismissed by skeptics as a drone swarm. Yet, the timing, energy interference, and witness consistency made it hard to ignore. Other claims have emerged about dimensional rifts opening inside abandoned buildings in the Lower East Side, where visitors vanish for hours and return with no memory. Paranormal investigators, YouTubers, and amateur ufologists now treat New York City like a living laboratory for anomalous phenomena. Simultaneously, a new fear has emerged, that monsters and extraterrestrials no longer need to hide. With face altering, AI, deepfakes, and cloaking tech, some theorists argue they could walk among us, posing as influencers, corporate moguls, or politicians. What was once confined to shadowy corners and crackling radio waves has now become part of our daily feed. In a city that never sleeps, perhaps it's because the otherworldly is wide awake.